Hey there. It would appear that when I made my recording in class on Tuesday, the battery for the microphone receiver was not charged well enough, and so I didn't record any sound, because of course I didn't on a day when I have a whole lot of stuff that I need to explain. So so bear with me as I try to talk over the video footage that has no sound. I've sped it up quite a bit in order to make it a little more palatable, a little easier to digest, if you will. So anyway, we started this week with a technique referred to as finished to unfinished, or your syllabus might also call it loose to tight. This is a technique for freehand drawing by which we are going to start with very loose, very gestural steps, and then refine the drawing with each successive step. It's a 3-step process. The first step, you'll have your 2B charcoal pencil out, and you will work lightly and gesturally to block in your composition. You're not worrying about perfect line work. You're not worrying about objects looking exactly the way that you would expect them to do later. This is going to be a guide drawing on top of which you are going to build the rest of the drawing. What you do want to be careful about are your perspective, your proportions, and your placement. I kind of call these the 3 Ps, if you will. Folded into perspective and proportions is foreshortening. So when you're working at this stage, as I say, you don't want to worry about trying to make perfect line work. You're instead being careful to take measurements to get your perspective and your proportions correct. Is this object as big as it should be versus how another object looks? Is this how tall is this object versus how wide? And your placement, getting objects, and the scale, as I just wrote there, getting objects in the right places on your page in order to make sense of them, in order to get only what you want on the page and not having to include a whole lot of extra stuff when you make these drawings. So I am going to want you to include whatever is immediately surrounding the specific objects that you're interested in. Step 2, after you've done that entire composition in step 1, you're going to get out your 4B and draw right on top of this drawing and put in now your confident line work. Right? These should be the lines that are going to look like the finished drawing. Right? You get to use what's underneath as a guide, and then you're going to use that 4B and go over your contours. But I point out here, while I have this little frog in my hands, that we're not thinking about contours in the strict sense that we did last time. You can bring in contours that go around interior details, but I would really only stick to contours that help define the form of the object. Here I'm mentioning that I might go around some of the lines of the label of this bottle, but I'm not going to worry about, say, the text on the bottle or anything that's printed onto an object. These lines should be confident, and they should also be directional, meaning that they start somewhere and they go somewhere. And if you find yourself making a line and you find yourself not going in the exact direction that you want it to go, come back to the beginning of that line, try again, rather than scrubbing back and forth over the same line. Lines are always so much more beautiful and so much more interesting to look at when they have the evidence of the direction of the hand that made the line, as opposed to when you sort of scrub back and forth over a line and you just sort of deaden it. It just sort of feels like it's been nailed into the paper. It's stuck there. It doesn't have the energy of a line that has the evidence of the direction in which it was drawn. Right? So all of our lines should be confident. They know where they're beginning. They know where they're going. They should be directional, so you shouldn't be scrubbing back and forth over them. But also, it shouldn't be just a matter of tracing over the drawing that you already have on there. You should continue to look back at the still life, and you should correct any mistakes that you see. Third and final step, you get your 6B out, and you'll notice this is the first time I've mentioned the eraser. I want you to leave the eraser out of the first 2 steps. Here, with thinking about line variation, your 6B is there to strengthen any of the lines that you feel need to be darkened. Your eraser is there for one of 2 purposes. Either to erase down any lines that you feel are too dark. Either you erase them until the line that's left is exactly what you need, or erase them down and then come in with your 2 or 4B and put the line in that you need. Or, as I'm demonstrating here, as I sort of draw this cup by going through all 3 of the steps, right? My gestural stage, confident stage, and now my line variation. If it turns out you've got an area there's just such a big jumbled mess of lines that you feel like you need to erase that because it's going to be confusing, I understand that. But we're not erasing every single stray line. All right, so here I am about to start this drawing. I've got a little still life of objects that are sitting in front of me. Now, you may have noticed a little line that has popped up across there. It's because I'm trying to explain that I would have turned the paper in a landscape orientation. All right, and I'm talking about here those very quick marks. I'm just giving myself some guide marks here. Right, I've got this little tiny frog that I've decided I want to start with. So I just made a couple of marks. I think it should be down here. I think it should be this tall, and then I figured out how wide it should be. Then you can see within that space I've created for myself, I'm making very quick marks. This is sped up, yes, but not as much as you might think. A little bit later, I'm going to actually take the video back down to its regular speed so that you can see how quickly I am doing this. But I'm making very quick marks. I'm making very quick and swooping marks. They don't sort of do what's happening right here. So this is a moment where I pause to explain to students that this is what's going to happen. And this is at regular speed. That students often will do something like that, where they go scratch, 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 scratch to get a line in place. And when you do that, it takes that length of time you just watched me do that to discover whether or not that line's in the right place. Here I am moving at the kind of speed you should be moving, right? Where you're making lines very quickly, and when your eyes tell you that a mark is not in the right place, you try again and try again. Very similar to what we did last week in class. So anyway, So I am making those very quick marks, and as my eyes tell me that the mark that I have made is not quite right, I keep trying until my eyes tell me the line that I would need would be in there somewhere. Now, moving on to this wine bottle that was behind the frog, and I took some measurements to figure out, like, where should it come into contact with the frog? How wide should the bottle be? I gave myself some guide marks by just giving myself a vertical line that went up. I took some measurements on how high to get there. Then I'm working to get the curvature of where the bottle curves into where the neck is correct, and then building my neck from there. By, again, taking measurements for how tall that neck should be and things like that. Here I am just sort of scrubbing around, finding where the labels should be, thinking about the foreshortening on those. Right? Then I had a little hat that was up a little distance, so I'm trying to figure out how to get to it. So I got myself some perspective. This is the angle to get to that hat. How wide should that hat be? So I'm using the frog again as a comparison. There's how wide my hat should be. So then I've got the brim of the hat. I'm trying to get the ellipse of that in place. And then what I'm going to do, so you see that I haven't sped these up too much, is after I get the measurement for how tall this hat is, here I'm slowing down so that you can see I'm actually moving pretty quickly even when this is at regular speed. This is at regular speed. I haven't sped this up. I'm trying to show you the speed with which I'm putting marks down. I'm not fussing over them. I'm not scratching. I'm not taking my sweet time to get a line on. I'm making quick marks so that I can know quickly if they're in the right or wrong place. Normally they're in the wrong place. All right. So then I took some measurements to kind of get the table and the piece of fabric that was around them, just getting those angles correct and all of that in place. All right. Then I'm going to move on to step 2. I'll get my 4B out, and I'm going to go around these objects in a directional manner, a confident manner. Up there, I was just kind of showing how if you make a mistake and you find yourself not going in exactly the right direction, go back to where you started the line and start again rather than scrubbing around, right? We want these lines to be nice and confident. They should know where they're coming from. They should know where they're going. right? But it's not a matter of purely tracing over the drawing that's already there. Certainly it's there to help you. It's a guide. It does all the hard work for you, but you want to continue to look back at the objects and correct any mistakes that you might see. Now, I didn't bother going over the lines that made up the fabric and the table because I was trying to not stand in front of the class for too long. Now, however, I'm at the last step. I've got my 6B out. And I'm thinking about line variation, like making the lines around that frog darker to push it forward in space, or the lines along one side of the bottle versus the other darkened to give it a rounded feel. Then a darker line along the bottom of this hat to give it some weight. But then I was like, you know what? I think the lines around that hat are too dark. I want to lighten them up. So I erased and used my 2B, and then came in and gave myself some line variation. There, I'm just kind of pointing out that if I had made those lines in the fabric, that a good way to use my line variation there would have been to start off with that dark line and then let it trail as it went away. Whew! All right, so there you have it. Look at the examples that I've posted in Google Classroom. That'll help you sort of see how this technique works. You should definitely watch this before you come to class on Thursday if you missed class on Tuesday. Take care, everyone. Bye.